Well, hello again YouTube, and a happy new year if it's not too late to say that. My name is Hans, and welcome to my channel and to this episode of Darktable Insights. Darktable is one of the best free tools for organizing and editing your photos. And if you're new to this channel, it's supposed to be an introduction to Darktable on a beginners to intermediate level. Just before Christmas, a new version of Darktable came out, version 2.6. And in this we got a whole new bunch of tools in the box. Today I'll take you on a tour of what I think is some of the most important new tools. Some of them I don't master fully yet, but we'll get back to that later. So bear with me and let's get started. Okay, so here we are in Darktable 2.6. Now the first thing we notice in the light table view is that here when you have a vertically oriented image, the file format is now displayed vertically on the side of the image. So it's always easy to see which file format you have. The only exception is if you have a square format. Then the thumbnail will fill the whole frame, so you still don't see it. And the other thing to notice is when you hover over an image with your mouse, you can see under here you get some EXIF data, like the file name and exposure data of the image. This is something you can turn on and off in the preferences. So if we go up to preferences and we scroll down a bit, down here we have enable extended thumb overlay. So I have it enabled, and you can disable it if you want. And also, while we're in the preferences, if we scroll further down, we have the show scroll bars for center view, which right now I have it on light table. So I have scroll bars here on the side of the light table. I think we had this before too, but now if you click on this, we can choose to have it both on light table and darkroom, and that's a new one. So if I choose light table plus darkroom and I exit, then I have to restart Darktable for it to work. So now I have restarted Darktable, and if we go into darkroom on an image and we zoom in on the image, you can see here we have scroll bars on the side and below, for those who like to navigate the image that way. Of course we still can use the little square up here like we used to. Also, on the topic of zooming, if we go here on this zoom menu, we have, in addition to 100% and 200%, we now have 50%, and we have 400, 800 and up to 1600%. So we can zoom really far in. And still the middle mouse button works in the same way as before, with zooming to 100% and 200% and back out. And then another thing in the interface is this little question mark on the top. You have it both in darkroom and in light table. Enable this, then click on an element to see its online help. So if we enable it and I click on a module name, then we launch our web browser with the online manual for this module. So here we have the manual for the Denoise profiled module. Okay, let's get back to light table, and then we'll find an image to work with today, which is this portrait of my daughter. And first of all, we're going to take a look at the new duplicate manager. that we have on the left hand side of the darkroom view. This is a very powerful place to manage all your duplicate files. So here I have two versions of this image, and these are also here. As you can see, I've given the versions names. You can also delete the version by clicking this little X, and you can make new versions. So with this icon you can create a duplicate of the image with the same history stack, and with this one you can create a virgin duplicate of the image without any development. So what I'm going to do now is to click this one and make a new one. And it's based on this. It's based on this one, therefore it gets the same name. So I'll rename it. Let's call it Demo. And it's got the number 4. That's because I've made a few duplicates earlier that I deleted again. So number 0 is the original, number 1 is the first duplicate, number 4 is the fourth duplicate I ever made of this one. So this one is without anything applied, except the default things of white balance, highlight reconstruction, orientation, base curve. It's got a tone curve. That's weird. That's very weird. Well, we'll switch that off. So I'll just do some basic stuff to it, just to make it a bit nicer. I'll crop it a bit. Just get rid of this at the top. And we'll crank up the exposure like this and adjust white balance a bit. Too much. Okay, now it's a bit more pleasant to watch. I'll just get rid of those areas so I have a larger image. Then we can take a look at the news on the right hand side, and we'll start with the denoising, because both the raw denoise and the profile denoise have got this new graphic representation. It's like an equalizer. So we can, if we zoom in a bit, try to find some noise somewhere. Yeah. This is ISO 200, so there's not too much noise anyway. But we'll get a histogram. So we can adjust the frequency where the noise is. So this is obviously too much. Crank it down. So we can reduce only high frequency noise, or we can take the lower frequencies. This is in the raw denoise module, and also the profile denoise have gotten the same if you go into wavelets. Then we have the same thing here. We'll switch off the raw denoise again. So we have more control over what kind of noise you apply. And also there's been a couple of presets included for reducing luma noise and chroma noise in this method I've mentioned in another video that I'll link to up here, where you use 2 modules of noise reduction. So we can take this on the first instance, and then we can make a new instance, and we can apply the second preset on that one. Here we have a very nice noise reduction. Okay, we'll turn off the noise reduction again, so the processing will go a bit faster. And then we go on to Retouch module. This is one of those that I don't master fully yet, but it's based on frequency separation, and it's useful for skin smoothing and removing artifacts in the skin and things like that. So what we do is we grab this little triangle, drag it upwards to create a bunch of frequency levels. Then we can go into the first one and we can use this levels control to adjust the level of what we see. And when we go upwards in these gray boxes, we see larger and larger details. And then we can go out of this preview by pressing this little thing. Also the white box you see the blurred color image. Anyway, what we can do now is, if we want to say remove this little pimple here, we can choose a frequency level, then we can take a circle, and now we have the heal tool activated. There's also a cloning tool, a blur tool, and a fill tool. I don't really master the difference between them, so for now we'll just stick with the heal tool, and we'll make a small circle, place it around the spot, and then we can remove it. Now and we can remove the circle, the preview of the circle, and now it's mostly gone. So if we turn off the module, then it comes back again. So what we've done is to smooth out the area in this frequency here. And to make it better, we can try to do the same thing on a couple more frequencies. So now it's even more gone. I can do the same with this one, this little red spot here. I think we might try an even larger scale. There. So in this way you can go around your image and remove distractions. I think it's a quite powerful tool as long as you master it, but I don't really yet. We'll zoom out and we'll go on to the color balance, which is, it's an old module, but it's been reworked. So before it looked like this, and now we got some new options here. There are new ways to display the control sliders. There you have the red, green and blue channels and the levels in the blacks, the midtones and the highlights. Where I could say take the red channel in the highlights, drag it towards red or towards cyan to change the colors. But now we have an HSL alternative, which let us choose the hue that we want to drag towards quite accurately without having to balance all the three channels. So if I say I want to make the highlights colder, I can drag it towards the blue area, then I can drag saturation up, like this. Sorry for the banging, that's my neighbor building a new kitchen. And then if I'm not happy with the color balance, I can adjust the hue afterwards towards a bit more blue or perhaps green. And we also have the ability to show both. So now we have both the hue, saturation, luminance, and we have the red, green and blue. For those who want that. Also we have a mode. We have lift, gamma, gain in sRGB color space. That's the old one. We also have a couple options in ProPhoto RGB color space, which is a larger color space with more room. And if we go to lift, gamma, gain in ProPhoto, then we get more color. I prefer to have this one in the HSL mode, so I don't get confused. And then it's easier to fine-tune. Also we got the slope, offset and power mode, which is which makes this factor sliders work a bit differently. I think we see that best if we go to our grayscale image. Go over here and we set histogram to waveform. Then we can see in the slope offset power mode, if we drag the highlights down, all the way down, it's not doing that much. If we do the same thing and lift gamma gain, then it's doing much more. And also the gamma quite a bit, and lift gamma gain. If we go over to slope, offset and power, see it's not that powerful. And then the blacks in slope, offset and power works quite differently than if we go to lift gamma gain. You can see when we lift the blacks in the lift gamma gain mode, it lifts linearly. But if we do it in slope, offset and power, then it lifts the lower part more. So it's not linear. And also in the Pro Photo mode, we got these extra controls at the top here, with saturation controls and some contrast controls. We'll go back to our portrait to show those. So we have input saturation and output saturation, which means that saturation can be applied both before and after the color balance adjustment. And also we have a contrast control, can increase contrast. Let's go back to normal histogram view. And this contrast fulcrum, it's set to 18% gray, which is a normal skin tone level. And if we adjust that, I guess that would be the midpoint that the contrast controls work around. So when contrast is set at 0, then this won't have any effect. Let's see on a grayscale. So now the contrast is adjusted around the center of the curve. Let's say if we increase the contrast fulcrum, then the contrast is centered around this point, which is higher up. And increase it further, and the contrast will work around the point further up on the curve. Now let's go on to the Filmic module, which is another new module that is quite difficult to master fully. This one is meant to replace the base curve module and also to act more like film. So if we head over here and we disable the base curve, then we can go back and okay. Before we use the Filmic curve, we should make sure there is no clipping, especially in the highlights, which there is not, so we don't need to adjust exposure. And we can turn Filmic on and we can start looking at the controls. First one is middle gray luminance. It's set at 18%, and if we drag it down, we lighten up the image, which means that a lower luminance is brought up into the middle. So we should drag it down until the histogram is centered more or less in the middle of the graph. Like this perhaps, because this image is a little bit underexposed. Then we have the white relative exposure. Drag it down to lift the whites. Black relative exposure. Drag it up and you increase the contrast. And this safety factor, it says it's useful in conjunction with auto-tune levels, which is this eyedropper that tries to guess for an automatic correction. I don't like automatic corrections in any way, so I stay away from it. And I'm not really sure what this does. Is it adjusts the contrast in some way? Oops, it adjusts everything. So we'll just reset it. As far as I understand it, these upper controls are more or less more technical controls to get a good starting point, and these lower controls are more creative. So if we go down here, we can adjust the contrast more. Latitude takes the contrast between those 2 points here. But in between here the curve is more or less straight, and the S curve is on the outside at either end. So you can bring this up to expand the linear part of the curve, and then you can adjust the contrast to compensate in the shadows. Also you can balance the shadows and highlights to protect details. And if we bring it down here, then we lift the shadows. And we also bring the highlights down a bit, giving more detail in both shadows and highlights. And then we can take the latitude again to close down the shadows, but with the detail. Well, I'm not I'm not so sure about anything on this module yet, other than it can give very great results. I found out that much. But the author of this module has written a very good article on his blog that explains everything better than I can do. And I'll link to the blog, I'll link to that post in the description. So go ahead and read it if you want to understand this module better. So I think we'll leave it at that, and we'll take a look at some new stuff in the tone curve module. Start at the top. There are some new color space choices. We had these more or less before, but they were located at the bottom and they were organized a little bit different. So what was the default before was this one, where we work in LAB color space and with L channel, A channel and B channel, which could be adjusted separately. We still have this opportunity, but new default is RGB and linked. So now we take all channels separately, and it gives a very natural result if we manipulate the curve. And then there's down here interpolation method. That's the way the curve is shaped. So if we have monolithic spline, which is the default, you can see the curve is more or less linear down here, then there's the curved part, and then it's linear again. If we go to centripetal spline, then it's even more linear and the curve is sharper. And we have cubic spline, which is a smooth curve all the way. Also we have the scale, which can be linear or logarithmic, which means that in logarithmic we have more room in the blacks between these grid lines. And you can change the base of the logarithm, which will give even more space in the blacks. So this gives more control to fine-tune the curve down in the blacks. Like this. If we now go back to linear, then we're just down here, so it's more difficult to make these tiny adjustments. And there's also the ability to have logarithmic in just one direction, in X or in Y. Okay, I think that just about wraps up what I wanted to go through today, so I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!